This is Matthew Cratter from Trade University, and today I want to talk a little bit about how the creepy IMF is attacking El Salvador over Bitcoin. If you don't know what the IMF is, it stands for International Monetary Fund, and you're not going to believe what kind of group this is. It's another one of those creepy globalist institutions that came out of the Bretton Woods Conference in 1945, along with the World Bank and the BIS, which is the Bank of International Settlements. Now, what is the IMF's mission? It sounds benevolent enough. The IMF is an organization of 190 countries working to foster global monetary cooperation. For that, you can just read control, secure financial stability, facilitate international trade, blah, blah, blah. Oh yeah, and reduce poverty around the world. Not sure that it does that, but it does have some of the creepiest people of all time heading it. There's this revolving door that exists between the IMF, the World Bank, and various countries' central banks that helps to keep some of the world's greatest rent seekers, parasites, criminals, and creeps permanently employed. And we can see this very easily if we just look at the list of previous IMF chiefs. So we have Rodrigo Rato, Dr. Dominique Strauss-Kahn, Christine Lagarde, and currently Dr. Kristalina Georgieva. We can take a quick look at these people. They're a lovely bunch of people. Rodrigo Rato was arrested in 2015 for alleged fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. He was found guilty of embezzlement in 2017 and sentenced to 4.5 years in prison. His successor was Strauss-Kahn. He was accused of 4 felony charges, 2 of criminal sexual acts, forcing a housekeeper to perform oral sex on him, attempted rape, and sexual abuse as well. Next IMF chief was Christine Lagarde, who was convicted over a bribery payout. But fortunately for her, at least, this did not prevent her from becoming the current president of the European Central Bank. So you can see what I meant when I said there's a revolving door that allows these people, no matter what they do, doesn't matter if they're convicted of something, they get a new job. Finally, the current IMF chief is Kristalina Georgieva. She is an apologist for the Chinese Communist Party, in my opinion. There are all these allegations. She tampered with data during her time as chief executive, again, the revolving door chief executive of the World Bank, to improve China's global standing in the business and investment world. So the good news now, at least the good news for the Chinese communists, is that the IMF is run by someone who is very happy to appease them. The IMF, the headquarters are located in a well-known swamp known as Washington, D.C. And the IMF, I think the best way to understand it is to use the mafia metaphor. Here's a loan, my friend. Now you owe me for life, and you're going to have to do one favor after another. The way they do this is they issue loans to developing countries when they're desperate, much as you might go to the mafia for a loan in the old days when you were desperate. They load up these developing countries with debt, and then they slowly insert their own bureaucrats to take over and manage the country. Again, this is not about raising people out of poverty. This is about central banker and elite control of small countries that fall prey to the IMF. If you're finding this video helpful, I'd ask you to hit that subscribe and like button. Also, maybe share it with a few friends. If you wanted to learn more about the IMF and how it works too, very interesting videos based on this book by John Perkins, An Economic Hitman Confesses, or Confessions of an Economic Hitman. So I'll link to this page, and you can follow up with that if you're interested. As various groups point out, the IMF's record over the past 50 years has been dismal. As numerous books and studies have documented, the IMF does not appear to have helped countries either achieve self-sustaining growth or promote market reforms. And that's a little bit like saying that some slaveholder did not take good care of their slaves. The whole point of it is to control these countries. The point is not to make them self-sufficient. The IMF wants these countries to be permanent vassals. So now you can see why the IMF has the quote-unquote moral authority to tell El Salvador what to do, in spite of their very slimy background. And their main thing that they're crying about, that these bureaucrats and elites are crying about, is that El Salvador has adopted as of September of last year, has adopted Bitcoin as legal tender. And you can imagine how scared and angry this has them. And this is one reason the El Salvador story is so important. So the IMF just released this latest blog post talking about the dialogue that's been going on between the IMF and El Salvador, the leader Bukele of El Salvador, and what the IMF wants them to do. From this report, we learn the IMF says the government has adopted Bitcoin as legal tender, and then the IMF goes on to warn the adoption of a cryptocurrency as legal tender, however, entails large risks for financial and market integrity, financial stability, and consumer protection. Of course, we know that the IMF cares a lot about financial stability because we've had one financial crisis after another since the IMF was founded. If the IMF is worried about consumer protection and fraud, I don't remember the IMF ever criticizing the central bankers in the U.S. for trading based on insider information they had. I don't remember the IMF ever coming out against Nancy Pelosi, making millions off of her insider information from Congress. But it's funny, the IMF is very, very concerned about a tiny little country that it wants to bully. The IMF is basically another front for the US dollar hegemony, and so obviously it's not going to attack central bankers. If the IMF were worried about maintaining purchasing power, financial stability, the stability of currencies, it might also have something to say about the dollar, which loses purchasing power every single year. And this is something, of course, that the IMF doesn't mention, fails to mention in the report. In addition, in this IMF report about El Salvador, the directors there agreed, this is a quote, agreed on the importance of boosting financial inclusion and noted that digital means of payment, such as the Chivo e-wallet, which is the government wallet for Bitcoin and dollars in El Salvador, that this wallet could play this role. However, they emphasized the need for strict regulation and oversight of the new ecosystem of Chivo and Bitcoin. So they're basically saying, we're happy if you have Bitcoin, if you're going to keep it, you should make it legal tender, and you should also give us complete control over the system, which of course is a complete contradiction in terms the whole point of Bitcoin is to build a parallel system and to cut these scumbags like who run the IMF, to cut them out and to loosen their control on small countries. The president of El Salvador, Nayib Bukele, tweeted this Simpsons clip, this Simpsons meme, "I see you, IMF, that's very nice." So he's basically a very, very brave man, considering that these people are despicable and have certainly the potential to take down leaders, if you know what I'm saying. But Bukele seems to be a very, very courageous individual. And now that he's got his Bitcoin, he's telling the IMF to go where. The IMF has been bullying El Salvador for really the past year. They kept warning them ahead of adopting Bitcoin. They issued veiled warnings and threats and said, we're not going to loan you money now. And fortunately, the Bitcoin CEO has rejected the IMF demand and will continue to make Bitcoin legal tender in more nations. Of course, this is a joke. This is a meme. There's no Bitcoin CEO. Ethereum has a CEO named Vitalik Buterin. Bitcoin has a disappeared founder and is not controlled by any central group. But I thought this is a great meme suggesting that Bitcoin will continue to spread as legal tender. What we're seeing is the very beginning of an arms race, a geopolitical arms race to acquire Bitcoin. People like Max Kaiser have confirmed that there's another country that's in the process of accumulating Bitcoin right now. And I think this is why the IMF singled out Bitcoin as legal tender in El Salvador as their chief concern. They're terrified that other countries will adopt Bitcoin as legal tender, and thus they won't need the IMF anymore, and they'll be able to bypass their threats and their demands. If El Salvador, for example, can raise money from these Bitcoin bonds, the volcano bonds that's in the process of issuing, and if it also benefits from the increased economic activity from Bitcoiners moving there, visiting there, Bitcoin is really in the process of putting El Salvador back on the map and restoring its El Salvador's image. So if El Salvador can benefit economically from the Bitcoin revolution, it's not going to need to be dependent on borrowing money from the IMF. There's another blog post here on the IMF website saying that digital money must be designed, regulated, and provided so that governments maintain control over monetary policy to stabilize prices. They're obviously alluding here to central bank digital currencies, which China already has one, and these are coming down the pike for everyone. But they really show their true colors here when they say it's fine if you have digital money. It just need to leave us in control. Unfortunately, IMF pretends they need control over monetary policy to stabilize prices. We know what a lie this is. We know what inflation has been like since 1971 when we entered the modern fiat system. Just over the past year, we had the highest inflation since 1982. Again, the IMF does not seem to be concerned about things like this. They're not interested in monetary stability. They don't care about the poor. All they care about is keeping very, very sick people in power, people like Strauss-Kahn, people like Rato, and they want to maintain control. They want to maintain this US dollar hegemony, and that's their chief concern. And so I personally fear for the life of Bukele. I think the IMF is extremely dangerous, and he's certainly a brave individual for standing up to them. And I hope that he's not alone. I hope more countries join him. And we could see the dominoes fall fairly quickly once this starts. We could see most of Latin America convert over to Bitcoin. We could see pockets in Asia. We could see Russia, etc. And once this happens, I fear that the U.S. and the ECB, or the EU, will be the last ones. I hope the U.S. gets smart, starts setting up the equivalent of Fort Knox for Bitcoin, starts creating a Bitcoin fund and accumulating Bitcoin, whether the Fed does it or the federal government does it. But I'm not optimistic about that. In the meantime, though, I do think we see a continued economics arms race, a geopolitical arms race to acquire a big Bitcoin. And obviously, this is fantastic for Bitcoin adoption, as well as for number go up and Bitcoin's price. If you found this video helpful, be sure to hit that subscribe and like button. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I publish my next video. And let me know your questions and comments in the comment section below. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.